Right. Good evening, all. My name is Adina Levin. Welcome to the September 8th Complete Streets Commission meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with Complete Streets Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in the federal, state, and local emergency. Moving on to the roll call, would like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and staff present. I'm Chair Adina Levin. Commissioners present include Brian Altman, Katie Baruzzi, Jackie Cebrian, Sally Cole, J.K. Jensen, Elizabeth King, and Lydia Lee. Commissioner Cromie is not here yet at this time. Staff present include Kevin Chen and Patrick Palmer. Patrick, can you please provide instructions to the Complete Streets Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed from here?
Yes, thank you, Chair Levin and members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the September 8th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you all for attending. At this time, we will ask that the members of the commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Complete Streets Commission. For members of the public who are calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9 to raise your virtual hand. That concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to reports and announcements, where staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Kevin, can you please present reports and announcements that you may have?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening to everyone here. So I have one update for the Commission that is the result of a recent City Council action. The City Council adopted a resolution to establish 15 miles per hour zones for all the public and private schools within, or for most of the public and private schools within the City of Menlo Park. And that 15 miles per hour school zone is established essentially within the 500 feet radius of the school. So it's a really exciting development in that area. And then of course, the following step would be for staff to look into the implementation of the signs and the necessary signage and other requirements to actually enforce the zones. So with that, I will conclude my announcements. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item D, which is public comment, under which the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agendized issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Patrick, do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda at this time?
It does not look like it. I would just like to remind any members of the public who might have just joined us, if you do have a comment to make, just raise your virtual hand and I will be able to unmute you. But no, it does not look like we have one at this time. Okay,
and I do see that Commissioner Baruzzi has a hand, which may have been on the previous item. Commissioner Baruzzi, go ahead. Sorry to have missed that.
No, yeah, I wasn't fast enough. I did want to follow up. Kevin, thanks so much for giving us the update on the 15 miles an hour. I'm really curious about how we're going to measure whether that's working. So how will we know whether people are slowing down? Is there, I mean, 15 miles an hour on some of those streets is significantly slower than how people habitually drive. So I just love to know if you have thoughts on enforcement or road design features that might make, enforcement less essential, and whether there's going to be any kind of measurement that staff are recommending to, see if it's having the intended effect or the intended impact, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So typically with something like this where we establish a new speed zone, we'll work with the police department to alert them of the new developments and the new signs that will be building up. And at the same time, they will typically go out doing at least for the start of the year, school year, to increase the enforcement and making sure that all the signs are placed properly, and just general enforcement as well. Currently, we don't have anything set up for, I think what you would describe as a evaluation, a formal evaluation, although we typically, there's typically a very good job by either the school or some of the parents or just people walking by, letting us know whether or not people are speeding down the school areas, doing drop off and pickup time. So we typically rely on those type of feedbacks before we move on to the next set of evaluation.
I know we have a busy agenda tonight, so I don't want to ask the 5 follow-up questions I have, but I'm wondering if maybe we can talk about this a little more in a future meeting, because I think that, it's worth digging into a little.
Yeah, sure. No,
I know we've had it before, but I just,
Yeah, so would this be appropriate to inquire under the Safe Routes to School subcommittee, to the extent that there may be some future items that relate to school travel? Maybe that's a place to get a little bit of direction on this that's not at the level of a full agenda item.
Sure, or maybe our subcommittee could talk offline with Kevin and we well, thanks, that's a good idea.
All right,
Thanks.
fantastic. So so before we move on to regular business, I wanted to state for the record that Commissioner Cromie is also now present. Welcome, Commissioner Cromie. We are moving on to the regular business. Item E, where the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. And the first item of regular business is E1, to approve the Complete Streets Commission regular meeting minutes of August 11th, 2021. And any clarification or corrections from the commission before moving to public comment on this item. I see Commissioner Lee has a hand.
Yes, can you guys hear me? Okay, so without rehashing the entire meeting again from last time, I noticed that in, let's see, which E is this? E2 for the Bellhaven Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan. There's a bullet point that says pause permanent bulb out installation on Newbridge Street. It's a little mysterious because we don't say why we're pausing the permanent bulb out installation on Newbridge Street, and they're considering temporary measures to Newbridge Street that still reduce car speed and improve pedestrian safety without impacting bicycle travel. I mean, we who were there know that the pause or the stop or reject permanent bulb out installation was specifically because you're impacting bicycles. So it would be nice to see that a little bit clearer, to say, like, why are we pausing the permanent bulb out installation? And is it actually paused? Did we actually agree to pause, or we wanted to see that off the table because of Newbridge Street's focus as Newbridge Street's role as a critical bike corridor?
Right. Yeah. So that's a great feedback. So essentially, I think so. The last bullet point right there essentially is the response as to why the pause was being recommended. So perhaps we can kind of structure that a little bit, restructure that a little bit to be more clear. Instead of having 2 bullets, perhaps it should be maybe 1 bullet, because you have the action and then followed by the cause of the action. So if that's amenable to the commission here, we can include that edit as a amendment and then pass it that way.
Okay, yeah, and I thought it was like we were not, I thought it wasn't just pause, it was like a no on that. But again, maybe my memory serves me incorrectly.
I sort of remember the way you do, Lydia, in part because I think what we came to is the bulb outs, there's too much with the bikes. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a way to make the bulb outs on Newbridge be safe. And then part of the conversation was about like, who was really turning, like, was it a necessary thing on Newbridge? I think there was that, but really it was because of all the buses and like, there's no way to make the sidewalks yeah. And so I don't know that there is a way right now to make the bulb outs work on Newbridge. And I kind of thought that's where we landed. Like, we could all look for some great innovative solution that, to Kevin's thing, like, doesn't impact cyclists, but this is really about the impact to cyclists. And I think like, as we sort of sort through bicycle policy, it's nice to see it laid out where we are like trying to notice all those modes.
Yeah, so I would propose that that it's not just pause, but, do not, or whatever the correct wording would be, to say like, we do not support
Mhm.
the installation of bulb outs on Newbridge itself.
Commissioner Baruzzi.
Actually, I think there was one other thing that you're refreshing my memory, that didn't make it into the minutes, and I think that's relevant. I thought we talked about some missing data. And we might have even asked staff, am I the only one who remembers this? That in the staff report, there were data about crossings and about pedestrian activity. And then there were, for some intersections, the data weren't there. And I think we might have suggested that certainly if staff are really keen on the bulb outs, you'd want to see more data to support their necessity on Newbridge, because I think we were talking about, how many pedestrians are really doing this crossing on Newbridge? Is it worth it to harm, to cause the potential harm to cyclists? And so I don't know if that made it. I don't think that made it into the minutes either. And maybe it's just not possible to get more data on this. But I think we might have suggested to staff doing a little more digging into actual pedestrian activity crossing Newbridge at some of those intersections.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. So I do also remember that particular feedback from Commissioner Baruzzi. It did not make it to the motion. However, we did make a note of that, and that is something that we'll be following up on.
Okay.
Yeah, Katie, I think that's where the pause might have come into play. Like the pause, like if, for example, there are hordes of people crossing Newbridge at one particular place, maybe then bulb outs at that place makes sense. But I would argue that given where we are right now, and just to be really clear about that Newbridge is a major bicycle corridor, that we not, and since staff did not present any data about that, it suggests to me that it's not really a big consideration here. I'd just like to have a cleaner message, I guess.
So how would staff tweak the minutes based on the feedback from the commission?
Right. So I think there's two particular elements in this case. One is to essentially consolidate the last two bullet points into one to make the message more clear. And then the second bullet point, or the second item, would be to replace the word pause. So in this case, installation. I think the message is that the commission does not want to see permanent installation. So it's a little bit tough for me to come up with the wording right off the top of my head right now, but for the record, I think that's the message that I'm getting from the commission. So I can work off some language offline to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm reflecting the view of the commission correctly, that essentially the ask here is to not just pause but eliminate the installation, the permanent installation.
Okay, that looks like nods. So with that acknowledgement for how edits will be made to the minutes, here, let's see. I guess, are there any comments from members of the public on the minutes? I am not seeing any. Okay, bringing it back to the commission, with those changes, do I have a motion and a second for the minutes that include those changes? Commissioner Lee, that's
Sorry, at the risk of jumping in again here, I realize I don't see this reflected in the minutes where we talked about making the current temporary situation better for bicyclists as well. That was something that was what brought up. Is that, that is not here, right?
I believe that would be sort of the last sentence of the last bullet point is to basically to not for the temporary measure to not have any impact to bicycle travel.
Okay, got
So
it.
that's the
So
intent
that's
of that
covered in there?
sentence.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
okay. So with that clarification and the previous proposed revisions, does that bring enough support for a motion and a second on the minutes? Commissioner Lee, is that a motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Jensen, is that a second?
Yes.
All right, can staff help us to vote?
Great, thank you. So we have a second and a first and a second on the table here for those commissioners that would like to vote yes to this item. If you can please raise your hand and hold it for a couple of seconds for me. That would be, I am seeing unanimous with Commissioner Cromie abstain. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving on to agenda item E2, which is adopting a resolution to remove on-street parking at 951 College Avenue to construct a retaining curb. And we will have staff member Philip. Philip, can you please say your last name so that I don't butcher the pronunciation? Associate Civil Engineer to present the item.
Lenardi is my last name. Thank you very much. So I'll go ahead and get going. Thank you everyone for having me here today. As previously said, my name is Philip Lenardi. I am an Associate Civil Engineer with the City of Menlo Park. I'm here to speak with you about the 951 College Ave residential on-street parking removal. So the agenda that we have here today is to speak about the background, the evaluation, the action, and the next steps for this specific project. As you can see here, I've just circled the area in which we're going to have the discussion for. It is at the corner of Yale Road and College Ave. So the background for this one is we had a resident call the city and a request that we come out to have an evaluation of the drainage that was having an issue at this specific location. As you can see here, this photo was taken in the field during one of the rainy seasons, and there's significant ponding immediately in front of the 951 College Ave address. And this is immediately in front of his walkway coming into the road here. So what we did is we went out into the field to perform a field observation. What you're looking at is a photo at the other end of the kind of taking a 180 of the original photo. You can still see some of the ponding here. And essentially what we found is that this tree, this redwood tree on the right side of this photo has significant roots that are working their way through the road across the way, essentially. The roots that are closest to this tree are pretty much uprooting the asphalt fairly significantly. And so what that's doing is that's not letting the rainwater follow its natural path down the road here. And so it's ponding at this specific location. We decided to have a follow-up field observation meeting with our city arborist, and we discussed a few potential remedies for this issue. One of which we have landed on was to put a retaining curb at this specific location. So our goal is to create a retaining curb in an oval shape around this specific tree. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to preserve the roots and make sure the tree is safe. And while we do that, we can do some root trimming further out along the kind of middle to later half of the road here so that we can fix the drainage issue and allow for positive drainage across the way and down this road. We also spoke with the resident and let him know that this was the decision that we came up with, and he is more than okay with sacrificing that parking stall. So for the commission action, we'd like to adopt a resolution to remove that one on-street parking space as previously discussed in front of 951 College Ave. As you can see here, it's just a small photo showing that we're going to put some red curb along this spot. What we don't show here, which is the intention, is we're also going to have a little bit of a bulb, which is why around the tree, which is why we need to take that one parking stall. So the next steps are to remove that parking spot and to install the red curb and any reflectors for any sort of traffic later in the evening, and a 15-day appeal period succeeding approval of parking removal. Thank you very much. I don't know if we go into any questions, comments, or concerns here.
Yeah, that is very much the case. So are there any commissioners that have questions at this time? Let's see, I see a hand from Commissioner Cole.
Yes. Hi, Philip. I had a question. Is that redwood a public tree or a private tree?
It is a public tree. It is in the public right of way.
Okay, good to know. And also you mentioned something about reflectors. I was just wondering, for kids who bike on that street, on that side, et cetera, is there enough of a some sort of signal, or how is the curb being treated so they'll clearly see that there's a new curb there?
So that plan is still being developed, but currently the initial thought is that we're going to have red curb around it and then some sort of reflectors on either side so that whenever there are anyone hopefully with lights coming up to it, it will have some reflection on it and they will be able to see it as they're approaching this curb.
Okay, thanks. And moving on to a hand from Commissioner Lee.
Hey, Philip. So if this tree was originally planted by the city, is that right?
I'm not sure if it was originally planted by the city. I do know it's in the city right away. As for the full history of, unfortunately, I wouldn't know this one.
Got it. I mean, just to I don't know, to ask sort of go into the logic of this. So if people were to plant redwoods in the city right away, and then in the hopes that they could then narrow the street and beautify the street, then this would be the city's, the city generally pays for improvements to things that are disturbing the city right away. Is that right?
So I was looking this up a bit, and there is I forgot exactly what it's called, I'm sorry, but it is something with respect to upkeeping the sidewalk and that landscape in front of a residence or a property. Essentially, it is the owner's responsibility to upkeep that landscape and that sidewalk area. If there is any sort of damage, landscape overgrowth, upheaval, they need to maintain that so that pedestrians do have access for it. I could not find anything that spoke specifically with respect to any roadway damage or if there are routes coming into the roadway. So I think that's on a more case-by-case basis. But those at least were the findings.
Got it. Okay. And then the other question I have is there sort of a better long-term solution for the tree? Because I'm assuming the tree is going to continue to grow, and if you make more room for it, it's going to want to keep going. And so would it be a better long-term investment to put in like a bioswale or something around that area to, you're taking one spot out, I assume they're sort of trying to minimize the disturbance to the street, but given that you're going to go in there already, does it make sense to do more?
Right. And I think the intention is that we're going to create that retaining curb so that we could preserve the larger roots that are more immediately close to the trunk, or at least that was the discussion with the city arborist. I know there are, and it's slipping my mind, but it's some sort of fabric that we could put. Usually you have it in in the tree boxes that are placed in kind of the sidewalks or in downtown areas. These tree boxes have some sort of fabric to minimize the growth of the root or letting it go in and out and damaging the sidewalk and the roads. So we were discussing at this location at the perimeter of that retaining curb to install some of this fabric so that it wouldn't grow further out as it has been. But it's still a discussion that we need to have with the city arborist to make sure that it's okay, because we need him out on the site when we're doing this work, because he's also okaying exactly how much of that root we can trim. So we're going to see how far we can go with that and how much we can mitigate it.
All right, thanks.
All right, great. Commissioner Jensen.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. The document proposal says the implementation will be funded through the city's CIP on-call asphalt and concrete repair program. What portion of the program funding are we dedicating to this kind of project? And do we have other projects on the slate for the rest of the year?
So we have several different small projects within this on-call asphalt and concrete project. This is going to be within the section in which we're doing a lot of asphalt work and asphalt repair around the city. I don't know that I could specifically explain it to you as like we have them in specific buckets. Essentially, it's just a large on-call project that we have set aside that we're going to be doing asphalt first, and then concrete, and then as more issues come up, because the project is open for a year with the option for 2, and as more opportunities come up to fix areas that have been troubling for the city, we can do that as it goes on. But for right now, this specific portion is to go with the first set of projects, which is going to be asphalt repair and roadway repair. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Altman.
Hey, is the sewer on that side of the road?
I'm sorry?
Is the sewer on that side?
No, there's no sewer on that side.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners? I am not seeing any. At this point, I'd like to see if there are any comments from members of the public. If any members of the public have a comment, please do use Zoom and raise your virtual hand, and you can comment on this item at this time. I am not seeing any hands from members of the public, so I would like to bring this back to commission for any discussion or potential motions. Commissioner Bersey.
I move to accept the staff recommendation.
I move to second.
All right. Any comment on the motion before we go ahead and vote?
I second the move to second.
Okay. So with a motion, a second, and no discussion, staff, can you help us with the vote?
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So for those commissioners that would like to vote yes to this item, if you can please raise your hand and keep it up for a couple of seconds. Great, I'm seeing unanimous hand raising, so that's excellent. Great, thank you very much.
All right.
Motion
Well,
passes.
thank you.
And thank you,
And-
Philip.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is E3, and no, that is not, hang on for a second here. Which is, yeah, E3 is recommending that City Council adopt a resolution to remove the left turn restriction on Constitution Drive. And we will hear a staff presentation on the item from Christiane Choi, Senior Transportation Engineer.
Hi, good evening, Chair Levin and Complete Streets Commissioners. I'm Christiane Choi, Senior Transportation Engineer with the city's Transportation Division, and I'll be presenting tonight on the item for before you removing the left turn restriction on Constitution Drive. And let me just share my screen here. Can you see my screen? I can't see you guys though, so if you're nodding.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, we can, Christiane.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so on the agenda tonight, I'll be presenting the background of how we got to the left turn restriction, and then the applicant who's requesting the removal of that restriction will provide a presentation, and then I will then come back with the recommendation and the next steps. So this location is in the Bayfront area of the city. So if you're looking at the map here, Marsh Road is on the left side, the top is Bayfront Expressway, and in the center is Constitution Drive. And so this is an older aerial view of what the street configuration looked like before. There used to be what we called a hook, where kind of a road comes off Marsh Road just in one direction, and it curves into Independence Drive. And then there was also an intersection at Constitution. So this was a stop controlled intersection previously. And so the Menlo Gateway development, which is this section here, which we called the Constitution site, was approved in 2010. And as some other mitigation measures that required widening Marsh Road from other development projects came through, that required us to rethink this intersection here. And so we turned it into more of a T intersection where Constitution intersects Marsh Road. And so I'll show you this next one. So Marsh Road is over here, and then Constitution Drive was then extended out to meet Marsh Road. Now, because you can't exit out onto Marsh Road, we turned the first 150 feet in kind of what we'll say the southbound direction, if we say 101's north-south. So the southbound direction one way. And so then there were two lanes, one that went into the future parking garage as part of the Menlo Gateway development, and then one that went continued all the way down through to Chrysler. There's still a northbound lane coming from Chrysler up to about this area to provide, so there was a left turn lane that was provided to, it would end in a left turn lane that would provide access to these existing sites, 104 and 110 Constitution. But the Menlo Gateway development also provided a license agreement to allow for people who didn't realize that Constitution didn't go through, that they could also access their property and make a right turn and then come back out onto Constitution on this end to kind of get back to Chrysler. So now the Menlo Gateway project is now complete. They built 2 parking structures and 2 office buildings, and it's currently going to be occupied by Facebook. And here's a kind of a street view kind of view of the Constitution now, where we have the left turn restriction. Here's the parking garage and the driveway here. And then you can see the left turn access that's provided to the buildings.
Sorry, Christiane, can I get a sense of, sorry to interrupt you, but what, are we looking north?
Oh, in this direction, we are looking north towards Marsh Road. So Marsh Road's up here.
Okay. Thank you.
And then this is, it's, yeah, the left turn is the southbound here. That's not allowed today. And then this left turn is the northbound left turn that provides access to the existing buildings. So, so Facebook wanted to ask that this left turn restriction be removed because they wanted to allow for their more direct access for their commuter shuttles. And so I'm going to then now ask Facebook and their team to present their request and analysis. And so I'm going to stop sharing here and bring up their presentation. Okay. Then I think Vanessa, you were going to talk first.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Christiane. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Piers. I'm with Facebook Transportation. I appreciate you taking the time to hear us out this evening. I think we can skip over the first couple of slides. I think you've covered that pretty extensively, so thank you very much for that. I am hoping to cover from slide 8 onwards. Great, this is perfect, thank you. Right, I wanted to provide an overview for the reason for us requesting this removal of the left turn restriction at this western driveway to the Menlo Gateway development. So I'm sure as you're aware, Facebook provides a number of transportation services which help us reduce our vehicle trips. Many of these services, including a huge portion of our shuttles and on-demand vehicles, approach the Menlo Gateway development from Marsh. Currently, all these vehicles need to access the Gateway development from the western driveway, which allows for clockwise circulation on site and allows for people to safely enter and exit the vehicles on the right side. So with the current left turn restriction, there are increased trip lengths, travel times, and traffic on the surrounding road network, with these vehicles having to do circuitous routes from Marsh to access the western driveway. So if we move to the next slide, Christiane, I think this illustrates, oh, why is it cut off a little bit? Can everyone see the full slide, including Chrysler Drive?
I can't see it. I was just going to say something. The bottom bullet on this previous slide, I think, was cut off.
Okay, let me try to screen share again. Sorry about that. Let's see what happened.
Also try if that's
We could
possible.
also maybe reduce the percentage of the slide that's shown, like reduce it to 75% or something, and then we might be able to see the whole thing.
Is it still partial?
We're not, yeah, there it is.
That's much better. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So just to show you the impact of this restricted left turn movement. So the solid red line currently shows mostly our shuttles, but obviously other vehicles, including on-demands and TNCs, how they access the Menlo Gateway development. So obviously coming from Marsh Road, they need to go right onto Greyfront Expressway, down Chrysler, along Constitution, and then turn right at the western driveway, which, as I mentioned, they then do a clockwise loop on site, which allows people to board and alight on the right-hand side. So that's for the safety of employees and those using the services. With the kind of removal of that left turn restriction, these vehicles would be able to go from Marsh directly onto Constitution Drive and then left into the westernmost driveway. So of course, we would avoid a lot of circuitous routing for shuttles and other vehicles, reducing VMT, and of course, congestion on the surrounding road network as well. This would obviously serve our shuttles, which are a huge portion of traffic. As I say, 80% approach from Marsh in the AM. But if we move to the next slide, it would also provide some flexibility for our trams, which employees use to move between our mini campuses. So the tram routing in this area would serve MPK 61 and then MPK 62 and 63. Currently, with the left turn restriction, all trams are forced onto Chrysler Drive, left onto Constitution, and then into the western driveway. If the left turn restriction is moved, it allows us a little bit of flexibility to also use Independence Drive to kind of take traffic and pressure off of Chrysler Drive. So I hope that provides a good background as to the reason for us requesting this removal. And I'm going to hand over to Steve from Fair & Peers, who was our consultant, who's going to talk you through some of the analysis that was done to assess the impact of this change.
Thanks, Vanessa. If you want to go to the next slide. So yes, thank you for letting me join you tonight. I am Steve Davis from Fair & Peers, so oversaw the analysis of this. So I think you've seen, obviously, the memo that was provided by staff and provides a summary of our analysis. But we essentially looked at 3 scenarios to verify that this was a viable solution for access into the site at this western driveway. So obviously, to have a baseline understanding, we did an analysis of the existing conditions and how that would look according to the analysis software. But then we also analyzed both a near-term condition that would represent the analysis or the restriction being lifted so that left turns would be allowed into the site, which reflects what you see on the left with the existing 104 and 110 Constitution buildings as they are today. And then also a scenario that reflected the proposed and approved development for the Menlo Portal site as we understood at the time, that would remove those existing driveways for 104 and 110 Constitution and modify the access on the south side to make sure that everything worked both in the near term and the long term if this was something we were going to pursue. So if you want to step through to the next slide, zooming a little bit on what that looks like for the actual intersection. So you'll see 3 colors of arrows on here that perhaps is a little bit messier than we need for this presentation, but essentially red arrows are routes that we would expect only standard automobile traffic to be making. So for example, coming from the left, the first left-hand turn you see is folks turning into the parking garage, and that's really just standard vehicle traffic. Whereas the blue lines are lines that we would expect a larger number of vehicle types to be making. And this reflects what Vanessa was describing in terms of having on-demands, potentially the Facebook trams that travel between different locations on campus, as well as the larger commuter shuttle buses that could be turning in here if the restriction is lifted. And obviously, as it is today, they would already be making the westbound right turn into this same location. And then the gray arrows you're seeing are the traffic that isn't actually traveling to and from the Facebook site. And so the most critical of those being the left turns that are into, in the existing condition, the 104 and 110 sites on the south side. And then in future condition, those that would be turning into the future residential driveway for the Menlo Portal development that's on the south side of Constitution, slightly offset from the existing western driveway. So next slide. In terms of our analysis, we did evaluate then, what is the anticipated traffic volume level from the Facebook side that would be anticipated to come use this new access, being aware that obviously all the existing access points that are still there would continue to see traffic as well. And then also to get an understanding based both on the previous EIR work as well as our forecast of the traffic volumes, approximately what we would expect to see as the inbound traffic, really more so in the longer term Menlo Portal condition, because there's more trips in and out likely of that future Menlo Portal development than are in and out of the existing sites at 104 and 110. And with a particular eye towards understanding not just delay and level of service, which generally speaking were fairly negligible in both cases, not a whole lot of delay that would be caused by allowing this, but also trying to make sure we understood what the queuing potential was, since one of the most notable concerns would be wanting to ensure that we don't have queues from vehicles traveling, let's call it southbound, we call it eastbound in the report, on Constitution that are waiting to turn into the site, into the Facebook site. We don't want those vehicles backing up too close to Marsh Road. So what we did is did an analysis of that intersection, really of both of the primary driveway intersections for the Facebook side of this, and found that in both the near term and longer term Menlo Portal conditions, we wouldn't really ever expect there to be more than one vehicle or so queued on Constitution going away from Marsh Road, heading in the eastbound/southbound direction during either peak period. The greater potential for queuing is in the morning, given that that is when there is a larger, inbound flow for Facebook's vehicles. And it actually works out well that while the interaction between the left turn into Menlo Portal and the left turn into this western driveway would have a little bit of an overlap, there are a few unique characteristics here, that being the Menlo Portal's driveway here is residential use in nature, whereas Facebook's is more strictly, office type uses. Their peaking characteristics are opposite. So they do not have their inbound primary traffic demand happening at the same time. And you can see actually in the example here in the volumes shown, we'd expect about 45 vehicles going inbound to Facebook in the morning, and quite a bit less in the afternoon. And even though the volumes are lower from in the portal, they're reversed of that, a relatively small inbound residential demand in the morning, whereas more people would be likely returning home from work in the afternoon. So all things considered, if you figure that there's the possibility with the geometrics of the intersection that the two movements could have overlap in the space that they need on the roadway, you're still looking at less than 60 movements total between the two in the morning peak period, actually less than 50. And so really the way to think about it usually is that's fewer than one vehicle per minute trying to occupy that space. So that generally means you'll have relatively low queue potential. So it kind of back checks all of those numbers. So with that, I think just open up for questions, any that they have, anyone on the commission that has for us or for staff.
Okay, so I think I'll just finish up my presentation before we go to questions.
Thanks.
Let me just share back my presentation. So just wanted to, the outreach that we did, we sent out postcards notifying both the tenants and business owners in the 500 feet radius of this location to let them know about this item and the Complete Streets Commission meeting. We also had Facebook reach out to Greystar, who is the applicant for the Menlo Portal development, to just let them know that they were making this request. And I do want to point out that the Menlo Portal project was approved by the Planning Commission in early August. However, there is an appeal currently pending on this project. So we don't know what the outcome of that will be. However, there will still be left turn access regardless of whether it's the Menlo Portal development or the existing uses. And the Menlo Portal analysis is definitely more conservative. It has higher trip volumes than the existing uses today. So we did get an email today from Greystar. They don't have any objections to the left turn restriction removal. They did express some concern about the offset, but they think based on Steve's analysis, they show limited conflicts there. So we think that it should operate fairly well despite being offset. And then staff's recommendation is that the Complete Streets Commission recommend to City Council to adopt the resolution to remove this left turn restriction. And we expect to bring this item to the council in October for approval. So with that, I will conclude the presentation and open it up for questions.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll now take questions from members of the commission, and I see that Commissioner Seaborn has a hand.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions. So one of them is some are geared towards the Facebook piece of it, and some are kind of city questions. I saw in the thing that a lot of the data is based on in terms of future projections, like based on what the trip caps are. And one of my questions, because it often comes up over here, is who monitors the trip caps? And how do we know that they're being met? Because sometimes that is a question. And so the question is who monitors the trip caps? And when we're counting in trip caps, like in terms of traffic quantity, I assume that's why we have them. Like, are we counting the shuttles and the buses in those trip caps? Because they're using the streets just as much as cars are. And so I think as we're counting the vehicles that Facebook is producing over there, like we need to count all the vehicles. And then one of the questions for the Facebook question on the last slide, like 13, where the ins and outs are, I share that concern about the weird overlapping of the left turns, because like there are some long queuing lines. So, and I didn't see on there where people exit that place in the morning, because they're exiting that in the morning at a time when a ton of buses are coming in. And it seems like their exit overlaps with that extra left turn space, unless I'm missing something. And then the last part that I would add, and then just all the questions, is I didn't see any information in there about bike ped thing, and that intersection looks like a nightmare. So I'm curious what allowances we've made for all the bike pedestrian traffic that's going to be around that area. And that's all I have for like right now.
Okay, so I will start regarding the trip caps. So Facebook has trip caps at just 2 of their campuses, the Classic campus and their Bayfront campus, which is not these locations. These locations do have a trip cap, though. The Menlo Gateway Project did. They need to be monitored and annually. So they'll do a survey, collect the data, and they would collect the data at the driveways and then report that to the city. So that's done on an annual basis. It does count all cars, shuttle buses, and any kind of drop off, lift type vehicles, anything like that. All of those are collected as part of the monitoring. And then, did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of the bicycle and pedestrian analysis, so there is bike lanes on, sorry, I neglected to mention that there are bike lanes on Constitution today. As you head northbound on Constitution, and maybe I could bring up that one screen share. Let's see if I go back. So you can see the bike lanes over here. And then there's a bike lane on, so this bike lane is coming southbound from Marsh Road. And then there's a bike lane coming northbound on Constitution towards Marsh. And then there's a bike ramp that allows them to use the sidewalk here. So the sidewalk is supposed to be wider. And then this becomes kind of a shared bike and pedestrian path that continues on. And then there's an actual ped and bike path that's kind of parallel, that turns off and is parallel to Marsh Road, that then can lead you to across Bayfront if you wish to do so. Okay. So this is just going to be kind of a standard intersection where you have, I mean, the cars will need to yield to bicycles and pedestrians crossing here at the driveway, and there is a sign which unfortunately is cut off here that actually says for the right turns, yield to pedestrians. And the same pathway will then just continue on to towards Marsh Road. Okay. And then I think you had one more question that I missed. I forgot what it was.
I think that was mostly about the bike ped bit and whether the shuttle bus is counted towards the vehicle trips. I do see how changing the route that left turn removal is, like getting all that traffic off of Chrysler and Bayfront, would be really helpful. So I do see that. I worry about the queuing on this street and whether it's going to be difficult to turn. So maybe like the sort of leave this space clear for the driveway, like on the roadway, to make sure that people can turn left into their house. Like, yeah.
Yes, that could be a recommendation that we add a keep clear kind of in this intersection space.
Great. Thanks. So Commissioner Sebrin, if your questions have been answered, I see that Commissioner Baruzzi has a hand.
I did have the one about the outbound, like from the Facebook data presentation about, I saw like a lot of the conversation was around the incoming traffic, but I didn't see any conversation about the outgoing traffic while the buses are, because like commuters come in and people leave for work at the same time in that intersection. And I didn't see that data. It looked like people were coming home like different opposite from when Facebook buses were arriving. But I feel like the Facebook buses arrive a lot in the morning and the afternoon. So that was a confusing piece for me. So if there is a place where we've looked at how those people are going to leave their houses, that's good. Then I just missed it.
And I can speak to that briefly if that's all right. So the analysis we did reflect both the morning and the afternoon periods and did include all of the inbound and outbound traffic from both the Menlo Portal side and the Facebook side. The reason for the fact that you're seeing like here a much larger number of inbound left turns in the morning versus in the afternoon for the buses, just to address that piece of it, is basically because of where we are located within Facebook's, kind of larger spectrum of their Menlo Park facilities. That if you picture a bus that was headed to or from 101 arriving from 101, it would immediately turn off of Marsh Road into here. This would be its first point of arrival. If this were served by shuttle buses in the afternoon, for the most part, this wouldn't be the first point of arrival because the buses are generally starting from somewhere else on campus. They wouldn't be coming in from Marsh Road before serving these two buildings. So that's the reason for that discrepancy. The traffic volumes show somewhere in the ballpark of 20 vehicles that would be outbound in the morning from the Menlo Portal site. Regardless of this project, those would all be right turns because there isn't a path further to the north towards Marsh Road. But so the analysis does take into account that there'd be the much larger number of inbound vehicles for Facebook in the morning, both going past this driveway on Constitution as well as turning left into this driveway to some degree. But the overall operations actually balance out reasonably well because there is so little other conflicting traffic to those movements. There's not a large share of northbound traffic that's trying to make opposing lefts. So there would be really, whether this left turn is allowed or not, the number of conflicts for outbound rights from Menlo Portal is about the same. The primary competition, so to speak, for space they have is with the people already there on Constitution Drive heading southbound.
Thanks. Now I'm good.
Cool. Moving on to Commissioner Baruzzi, who has a hand.
Hi, yeah, I'm really interested in the intersection between Menlo Portal and the Facebook sites. And I think I know now that the Menlo Portal projected childcare site is supposed to be on Independence and not Constitution. But I do, when I look at all of these, I was looking earlier at the Menlo Portal visuals, and they have a whole lot of people, they're beautiful. They have a whole lot of people that are not in cars in the visuals, lots of people on foot and lots of people on bikes, which is like this great thing. And then there's this road between them. And I mean, I have a hypothesis that might be shared by other people here that certainly people who work at Facebook might be attracted to living in Menlo Portal. And that might even be, the design in theory that, we were going to have sort of a live, work, play area here. I think Facebook might even potentially rent the office space. So my point is, I could imagine there would be a lot of people wanting to cross Constitution Avenue on foot to get from one office to another. If they're working at Facebook, to go grab a cup of coffee, to walk from their 2-bedroom condo or apartment to their office, or to a shuttle stop. And I would love to feel better about the safety of those pedestrians. And when I look at all the confusing arrows, it makes me think about how even when you're only going 15 or 20 miles an hour, in unprotected intersections, there are only so many different pieces of information you can keep in your mind at one time. So you're looking for oncoming traffic, you're looking for, but you might miss the pedestrian that at the last minute that sort of creeps into your line of sight. So I'm curious about how you're thinking about pedestrian safety in that stretch. Yeah. That's my question.
So that's it's a good question. I think that right now we don't have any kind of mid-block crosswalks on Constitution. So the actual like designated crosswalk locations are kind of at the ends of the street, and so that might be something that we should consider in terms of as the future that kind of middle block between Constitution and Independence gets redeveloped, where it might make more sense to have kind of a pedestrian crossing and connect the different developments to each other. I know that as part of the general plan, we did consider a kind of a sale, but that hasn't been fully identified where that would be yet. I think it might be in a future development, but that's something that we will consider as we move forward with those developments.
I guess I would just say thank you so much, Christiane. I would love to hear more about this. I think it's a little bit ironic that we're talking about making sure shuttle buses don't drive out of their way. Like the shuttle buses have to drive around the block right now, but they have motors. It's like, you know, so pedestrians, I think we know that on college campuses, when they're designing where people can walk, they look at where the grass is trod, right? You're not, it's like watching water flow. Pedestrians are gonna cross. They're not gonna walk half a block or a whole block out of their way to cross and then come all the way back. I think you can expect people to cross mid-block. It may even be, depending on how official these driveways are, I don't remember what the vehicle code says, these could even be considered unsignaled crosswalks, right? Certainly if there's a street, it's a crosswalk, whether one is painted or not. I really hope that that we don't create an unintentional hazard here for people and defeat the whole purpose of this idea of having housing close to workplaces. So please take this part really seriously. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And a good point that we may return to when we come to motions. There's several other commissioners who have a hand raised. Commissioner King.
Yeah, my question was, when we were looking at the traffic count numbers, turning in both sides and commenting on how they were under 50, I wondered what the time frame that those counts were done under or within. Can you address that?
Yes, I think so. We provided the consultant Fair and Peers with the counts that were done in 2019. However, there was construction going on because the Menlo Gateway buildings were under construction at the time. And so we looked back at previous counts from 2017 to kind of compare and see where we might need to make some adjustments onto Constitution. And so those are the numbers that we provided to Steve to use in their analysis.
All right. Does that, Commissioner King, does that address your question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. So I'm moving on to Vice Chair Cole.
Well, I thought that Commissioner Baruzzi made a really good point. You know, I was heavily involved in the employee experience at Apple Park and then in observing the usage of Apple Park after we launched it. And I absolutely agree with her that, you know, there are desire paths, as we call them at Apple Park, ways in which people want to naturally go and transect based on their usage of the whole property that we didn't anticipate. So if we think that there is a compelling reason for people to be crossing Constitution, you know, in the middle rather than at the endpoints, I think we should really make a motion to look at that, because I agree with her that we should anticipate that that's going to happen and plan for it, especially if it's being promoted as a place for people to live/work in Menlo Park.
Yeah, great, thanks. And so moving on to Commissioner Lee, who's had a hand.
So I'm going to echo what Commissioner Cole and Baruzzi have said too. And when I was when I was looking at the numbers, I was thinking, even if the numbers are low for potential conflict, it doesn't take a lot for someone to be confused, right? Given all the interactions there. I mean, regardless of the actual numbers, if the street is designed in such a way and the entrances are designed in such a way that things could be confusing, I don't think we want to try and avoid that risk if possible, right? So one thing that I did not see data on was how much of the entrances between Menlo Portal and the Gateway development, how much are they offset? Is there any potential for the two cars to want to turn into each other, right? And if there's a bicyclist, say, behind one of them, what danger does that pose? Would having more of an offset, and it sounds like we're also in a position right now where Menlo Portal is not constructed yet, right? So is there any way to move things around a little bit so that we don't have the visual blockage or chances of people? I know that just one-way streets, when you get, as a driver, when I get to a one-way street, it can be very, terrifying if I'm not expecting it, right? So I'm just trying to think, maybe statistically the chances are low, but there's still a chance for confusion. What can we do to mitigate that? So about the offset of the entrances, does anyone have an answer to that?
Steve, do you know roughly how many feet that is offset?
Trying to find the best estimate number we had. So this will be an approximation because we are in a situation where essentially there aren't really any plans that truly show both sets of things together. So it is an assemblage of the two different things because of one of them having been planned before the other one was planned, but then constructed after the other one was planned. So they kind of staggered in a way such that the drawings for the two didn't directly align with one another. But based on the information we have, we understand the offset to probably be somewhere in the area of 15 feet. So they would still share a center core that is similar to one another. One of the things we did consider and hadn't mentioned originally in terms of a difference here is we did figure that part of the approach to addressing that would be, I think, as one of the previous commissioners mentioned, the idea of keep clear markings in the southbound direction going away from Marsh Road, but also that a disproportionate number of those turns are made by a trained driver population that can be instructed on this interaction and essentially be, given the understanding of how it's supposed to operate and to give way to the inbound Menlo Portal drivers if there is the simultaneous demand between the two. So you think of anyone who's driving a shuttle bus or a tram for Facebook is a professional driver as opposed to someone who may be more easily confused. It is really by their nature, the folks traveling to and from Facebook are a repeat driver population who are less likely to be caught off guard by the facilities around them. So over time, that certainly does help mitigate that a bit, but there is certainly still some validity to that.
Yeah, I mean, the population that goes there all the time may be familiar. I'm just thinking you cannot predict, who's going to come down that road, right? And as a bicyclist, I'm also often going to places where I am not familiar with the exact conditions and I'm just going there for the first time. And if the road doesn't make sense to me, then I have to forge the best I can, right? So by design, it has to be, looking for safety by design, not by training or driver education. One more quick question. I wonder if it would be possible just to go over really quickly what the reason for the left turn restriction was in the first place. I want to make sure that I thoroughly understand that and that's, doesn't pose an issue here.
Yes. So we wanted to just make sure that the queues at the driveway wouldn't back up all the way to Marsh Road if a vehicle was waiting, to make a left there. And so that's why when Facebook approached the city with this request, we asked them to do the queuing analysis to indicate that the queuing back to Marsh Road would not occur. And so that's why staff feels comfortable recommending removing the restriction.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I see that Commissioner Cole has a hand raised.
Thank you. Can we, for a moment, can we go back to the presentation where it showed the aerial map? Because we are really focusing on, thanks, Christiane. We are really focusing on Facebook's usage of this area. I'm just gonna wait for the aerial view to show up.
Is this one work?
Next one.
Street view?
No, it was an aerial view of the map. Hold on. Is there something else on the slide deck that would show?
No, but was it from my presentation or was it from the applicant presentation? Because I have two presentations, so.
I know. Well, let's go to the applicant presentation. Maybe it was right before the, okay, next one. One after
Okay,
this, I think.
No, hold on, let me stop the share and.
No, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think this is important because we are focusing on Facebook usage. The consultant just said, you know, the drivers are used to the route, which is true. There we go. But my understanding is that this area has a very substantial, for example, like hotel, right? That's on Independence Drive.
Yes, the hotel is here.
Okay. So this also affects them, right? Does it affect, and I understand you only had like one public comment, but I'm just curious because commerce here is important. It's not just Facebook that's here. I know this hotel is an important development. Like, do we anticipate, have we heard anything negative or positive from them? Or do you anticipate this impacting them in a negative or positive way?
So we have not received any comments from the hotel, but I don't expect it to impact them in any kind of way. So their access does not change with this left turn restriction. People can come in through Constitution here, make this right turn and come into the hotel, or they can come up through Chrysler and access this way to the hotel.
Okay.
So they still have their two kind of ways to get into the hotel. That won't change.
Okay, so we don't anticipate any impact there. And knowing that this is like a mixed use and knowing that there are other things going on, Christiane, do you see any other important businesses in Menlo Park that may have a concern, or are you confident that this won't impact them?
Yeah, I don't, so this one-way option will remain regardless of whether we remove the left turn restriction. So if that's the part that's more confusing, that this is kind of this is permanent. So we're not asking to make any kind of changes here at this point. The only thing we're asking to change is to remove the left turn restriction. And so that's not going to change any kind of circulation otherwise.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks. And Commissioner Baruzzi.
Yeah, so speaking of aerial views, I was looking at this again on the map, and that whole area really right now is occupied by Facebook offices. So next to the Hotel Nia, there are offices that are Facebook offices. Facebook is currently, at least according to the map, on that block where Menlo Portal will eventually be built. And they have those blue bikes that they use to get around between offices. And so again, I just want to say that I really, it seems like a kind of a nutty oversight here, that we don't have any way to, I mean, Facebook's so great with not everybody's going to want to take a shuttle to run over and get coffee or go to a meeting. So I really, I may be wrong about this, but it just seems like this is basically effectively kind of a road through Facebook campus with a bunch of housing added, and I'm sure there are going to be some other businesses, but maybe not. So if you think about it that way, I wonder how that changes the on-site circulation patterns, and maybe we're just not there yet, but it's just it's funny, like when you go back and look at all of the beautiful drawings and renderings, that is like the glaringly missing thing to me. And so I mean, I don't know, like even now I'm curious how bikes are currently and pedestrians are currently using any of that? Because some of these buildings are already working. Does anybody know what the current sort of mid-block movements are or how people are getting around there?
So I think currently the Facebook is still primarily remote. So they're not occupying these buildings right now. So I don't think there's a lot of traffic out there today. And they haven't been, because these are newer buildings that have recently been constructed, other than the MP61 that's on Independence. I don't think it's been occupied at all by Facebook yet.
Yeah, that is correct, and we are still remote. I'm not anticipating to return to the office, I think, until early next year.
But there's like a big paseo between the buildings that's been designed, I think, between the Menlo Portal buildings that invites people to walk and presumably even bike between the buildings. So if a paseo is dumping out into a busy street with no facilities, that seems to be a little problematic.
Thanks. Commissioner Sebrian.
I do want to say that I think, like, as I look at the left turn, there's a lot that makes sense about it. So I empathize that so much of this discussion is actually not about your left turn, though a lot of it is. Like the bike ped thing, I just have to, I would just say that I think for all of the things that come forward, go like for the next, as Facebook plans all these next things, like everything has to include a clear bike ped plan, because that is just, it's a critical way to get around the neighborhood anymore, because it as soon as the traffic comes back, like it's going to become hard to get around again. And I know I see a lot of buses in training, so they're practicing to come back. And then the other thing I keep looping back to, like the traffic counts, and I'm sure I'll understand it eventually. Are the traffic counts based on the 2019 like use of the properties that are currently being made larger? So we were counting the people going to the old buildings?
Yeah, so the counts included the people in the old buildings. And then when Steve did his analysis, he added the traffic that would be generated by the new buildings, so that it includes both the existing plus the future building occupants.
Oh, and that was the part that they just used. They used the trip caps to sort of guess at how many people would be adding those extra people.
The other buildings, they estimated what those trips would be.
Okay. Yeah, that's all. I have the same concerns everybody else has over it, but it's more about the bike ped thing and less about the actual left turn.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Commissioner King or everybody else, if you have something additional to say that has not been said by a fellow commissioner, please do share. If you have something that agrees with a fellow commissioner, give them warm thought waves, and then we can start to take public comment and move towards motions.
I just wanted to inquire about what the population is in those two buildings. I think it's 62 and 63 at the end of maybe in 2022, when you are fully back to work. How many people are going to be working in each of those buildings? Then what's the population anticipated at Menlo Portal? So we can have some vision of what the pedestrian traffic might be 2 years down the road.
Commissioner, sorry, give me a second. Let me pull up that data for you.
So I'll need to look up how many units was proposed for Menlo Portal. Don't have that offhand.
All right.
Well, thanks for sharing when you can, because I'm just trying to envision what could be pedestrian traffic and how we can mitigated, just to follow up on what Katie was saying earlier?
I was just looking at the Menlo Portal website, and it looked like 115 Independence Drive was proposing 335 multifamily dwelling units. 123 Independence Drive was proposing 67 townhomes, 316 apartments. 111 Independence Drive was going to be 105. Those are the Independence Drive facing, and then there's a bunch of office space, but it was a lot, I think.
All right, so while Christiane may be looking up additional information, I did want to endorse what fellow commissioners said in terms of, given the fact that we're going to have homes across the street from offices and a goal for having a live, work, play environment, that having a bicycle and pedestrian analysis and recommendations as a matter of course is a thing that we should do. And when we make a motion, we may have both specific recommendations for this location to accommodate bicycle and pedestrian, and we'll want to seek future transportation elements coming forward that anticipate people walking and biking, to have those elements proactively addressed. While Christiane may be looking up any additional information, I wanted to see if there are any comments from members of the public before, to take into account before we bring it back to Commissioner deliberation. Commissioner deliberation. English is difficult. Are there any comments from members of the public? Please raise your hand using the Zoom virtual function. I do not see any hands from members of the public, and would like to bring this back to the commission for recommendations and motions. And I see, okay, nope, I don't. I see Commissioner Cole have a hand.
Just have a quick question since I'm new to the commission. Has Facebook provided a bike ped plan for their campus to the city of Menlo Park?
So they, do you mean for this particular project or,
No,
or
just generally? I'm just curious. Thanks.
I know that they have provided just bike and pedestrian kind of patterns and their circulation for kind of their larger campuses, the ones that they own. And then these developments have generally been approved and constructed by other developers, and then Facebook's leasing those properties. So they might include some other recommendations that they might do on site, but they don't.
I think my question, Christiane, pertains to the fact that that's something that this commission has focused on in this meeting. Several commissioners have expressed interest in Facebook's intent with relation to promoting and protecting bike and ped traffic. So I just wanted to know if there was a plan that Facebook had that could be shared with the commission or has previously been shared with the council.
I don't have one to share. Vanessa, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
I don't believe so. Of course, there are accommodations for bikes and peds at each of our campuses, but as Christiane mentioned, each of them are leased. So there might not be one holistic plan showing overall for the entire area, as these are leased at, different times. As an example.
So that's interesting, Vanessa, to your knowledge, there isn't a plan that, I understand that for different properties are leased. I worked at Google, but there's not a plan for pedestrian bike traffic going around campus the way there is for their trams that you mentioned.
Yeah. So for some of our campuses, so for instance, the Bayfront campus, as an example, would have a plan for bikes and peds moving around that campus, but not between the campuses necessarily. So not between Gateway and Bayfront, as an example.
Okay. Thank you. Noted.
And sorry, while I have the floor as well, just to mention the head count is pretty fluid at the moment, just given the uncertainty around working from home, but we're probably in the ballpark of about 3,000.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I would just say that my observation from listening tonight is that I hope the Facebook folks are noting that the interest is around Bike and Ped. And to the extent that you have, maybe a plan for the Gateway campus, but not for the other campus, Bayfront campus, I would hope and suggest that you would look at the thing as a whole, because we really like to encourage that kind of transportation in Menlo Park.
Deputy Noted, Commissioner, thank you.
Yeah, and another thing I would add to that while waiting for commissioners to have comments or motions is that these are public streets, and we certainly do see Facebook generally thriving and occupying more buildings. We know that over decades and decades, sometimes we do see a change in which businesses occupy which buildings, and we need to have street circulation that works, whether we have a single company that has really very robust transportation planning for its own, bike, ped, and other transit, as well as for, any other future occupants of the buildings and the city street. So it should work for non-Facebook users in some remotely distant future as well. Do we have from the commission, does anybody have, if I don't see anything, I don't see any hands. Okay, great. I see a hand from Commissioner Sebrian. Do you have any motions? Because I'll jump in with a motion unless somebody else does. Commissioner Sebrian.
I'm willing to try, but I might just have too many preconditions. So I'll try something and you can tell me if I'm just out in left field. But I would move to approve the removal of the left turn restriction there. In part because Menlo Portal actually isn't approved yet and people are going to come back. And so if we can anyway, in the short term, I definitely approve of it. I would like there to be the road marking piece. Again, some of it is Menlo Portal, which isn't even built yet. And so I don't even know how to attach conditions for a thing that doesn't exist yet in terms of the keeping clear of the driveway. And then the last thing I wonder is, can I make a motion to approve the left turn restriction with the markings on the roadway someday if they present it to council along with some bike ped information? So that when it goes to council, it looks like it has that bike ped information that we wished for. And then we agree. Can I do that?
Go ahead.
I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think certainly if the commission has a desire to make it as a motion, we can certainly craft something to reflect that. Although given the conversation that we have had tonight, I think it's fairly clear that there is a strong desire from the commission to at least look at that whole area holistically as a whole for mid-block crossing, for pedestrian, and as well as bicyclist. And I think to some point we also acknowledge that since none of the buildings are out yet, it's kind of hard to predict where the pedestrians are going to cross. We certainly have the Paseo as a ideal location that we can install some sort of a mid-block crossing, if you will. But to the point of other buildings, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult to assess that at this moment. So if the commission is amenable to it, I think staff on our end, we definitely are taking that into consideration as we review the future developments, as well as the buildings as they go up. This is something that we can look at on a periodic basis, and maybe making sure that we address the issues at hand at that time, rather than try to predict where people are going to cross. Because as we all know, as some of you mentioned, it's kind of hard to predict where people are going to cross mid-block without the buildings being there at this time. So I think my recommendation would be, we focus the motion on the project itself, and of course with the recognition that this is something that staff will definitely take back into consideration as many of these projects continue to move forward and as the buildings continue to develop, if that's amenable to the commission.
So I might have a suggested refinement, but first it would be helpful to have a second. Any second for the motion, which was to approve the removal of the turn restriction with keep clear and mid-bike block crossing or pedestrian pedestrian infrastructure in a way that works with the future development across the street. Is that a fair restatement? That is that a second from Commissioner King? Excellent. Kevin, was my restatement of that amenable to staff?
I believe so, but maybe with an eye towards Christiane to see if that's okay with her. I also see Commissioner Baruzzi has.
Commissioner Baruzzi.
So discussing the motion now that it's on the table, would it be possible to, like, when I think about how many different complex movements are going to be going on down here, the area of town that most comes to mind is actually the block of Santa Cruz Ave, or the several blocks of Santa Cruz Avenue, where we have on-street parking, crosswalks, bikes, and cars slowly moving through, and buses. I think, you know, considering the level of density that we're planning to have here eventually, as well as, you know, the high density of office workers, you know, you could expect something that complex. And even all the arrows that you had on your diagram looked pretty complex as well. So what I'd love to see is, you know, there's a really high rate of accidents on that section of Santa Cruz Ave and Menlo Park if you look at our accident data, but it's not an area where we have a lot of really bad accidents, like fatal accidents, because cars are driving so slowly. So where I'm going with this is, if you're going to build in this much complexity, all these different turning movements, and you can expect a lot of bikes and pedestrians, as evidenced by the actual architectural diagrams with all the phantom bikes and peds drawn in, I would love to see the city try to do something like design this street for a speed that is most comfortable at 15 miles an hour. Just, I mean, can you just build it in? This shouldn't be a cut through street. This should be like I mean, I'm talking like raised crosswalks, whatever you can do to simulate something that makes people really not want to go faster than a speed. Like, you basically just don't want somebody to accidentally kill a pedestrian. Like, if they're going under 20 miles an hour, the odds of that, unless they're a shuttle bus, are really slim. So can we make a friendly amendment to the motion that there's no time like the present to try to design this street in a more healthy way? Would whoever made the motion be interested in that? So
I'm amenable to that.
Is that reasonable, Kevin? Like, I get that I'm expanding the scope here, but if you're throwing in a bunch of turning movements, you might as well.
Yeah. Right. So I would say, kind of on paper, that definitely sounds like something that is beyond the scope of this project. I will, however, maybe indicate the fact that perhaps we could look at sort of the access again with respect to just the driveway entrances relative to the Menlo Portal, and see if there's any other way we can further enhance the intersection. The street, I'm also speaking with one eye towards Christiane, just in case I misspoke, because I'm not as familiar with the area. But you know, the street itself is pretty built out, but as somebody mentioned, Menlo Portal is not in yet. So maybe perhaps that's one area that we can look into and see how we can, if there's any way to enhance that particular intersection.
I'm wondering if maybe you can ask the council to expand the scope of this, because we certainly can't. Right. But if this is going to council, I would strongly suggest that even in our motion, we express a desire to expand the scope of this decision beyond let's add some left turns and eventually change the turning location for the other left turn. It just seems like not looking at this holistically it just invites problems down the road, and especially since Menlo Portal isn't totally baked yet. There's no time like the present to get it right. We don't have the capacity to do that, but certainly staff could go to council and with that question / recommendation.
So if I could just say, So I think that we can look at, some traffic calming, some other types of measures, but that, in order to get this left turn restriction removed and put in place, that time, and have it in place when Facebook were to occupy, I think it's not going to work in terms of getting the traffic calming in place first and then the left turn restriction. So I think I just want to make sure that you understand that, like, are you trying to condition that the left turn restriction not be removed until traffic calming is put in, or is it some other recommendation to consider that for the future?
I guess I think that we should do it sooner rather than later, and design a street where you're not going to have people going too fast. I don't know what kinds of construction activities that might be going on the other side of the street that could limit that. I don't know enough about the staging of the construction of Menlo Portal vis-a-vis the occupation of Menlo Gateway. But I'm sorry, somebody keeps trying to text me. It's like nighttime and the college friends are calling. I really would just recommend that staff maybe talk with the city manager. I don't know what the appropriate procedure would be. I feel fairly strongly that doing this in a piecemeal way is a mistake.
Okay, I would like to propose a different solution, because it seems like some of the bicycle and pedestrian accommodation is, like, we are saying as a commission, we don't think it's optional, but we also think that it should be done harmoniously with the Menlo Portal. And while Menlo Portal hasn't been approved and there is an appeal, it is also the case that I believe it's covered under SB 330, which means that if staff is going to not approve a housing development, they need to simultaneously zone for that many other units elsewhere in the city. And that's really hard to do. So I think that there's some reasonable assumption to be made that the housing is going to move forward just logically, and therefore it would be a reasonable recommendation to say, to go ahead with the removal of the turn restrictions, and to have bike ped solutions that take into account the design of the other development and take into account driving speed. Would that work? Does that address Commissioner Baruzzi's concern and the intent of the maker of the motion?
That seems reasonable.
I support that.
All right, Commissioner Baruzzi.
Sorry, that was a vestigial hand.
Okay. And personally, I wouldn't be comfortable saying let's not change the turn based on some things that we want but can't even specify yet. But I think we're also saying pretty firmly that the bike ped accommodations, including mid-block crossing and clear marking and so on, like, we want that to be done non-optionally and in conjunction with the other development. Does that, Commissioner Lee has a hand?
Yeah, I wonder at the same time, can we also advocate or strongly recommend that the entrance to Menlo Portal be greater than I don't know, whatever an urban planner would probably know what the ideal distance between entrances would be, but 15 feet does not strike me as enough for between, to have these entrances on opposite sides with the turning motions. So I don't know if there is a standard recommendation for that, and if we could say, like, hey, Menlo Portal, you need to take that into consideration for your project?
That is not, like, this agenda item is about the turning, and so I'm not sure that's agendized enough for us to make that comment, although the development is coming to council soon. So I think that's something that we could, as individuals, make as recommendations to council. Not sure whether we have the ability to be that specific about that here. If staff can help me out to say like what it is that, like, how can we make that comment to council as individuals or as a commission?
Right. So thank you for that clarification and question. So I think again, in some of the conversations here is definitely I think a bigger picture, a type of conversation that we as commission can have in subsequent meetings, irregardless of the item tonight here. Again, focusing on what is actually being approved here. We have the term restrictions. I think it's certainly within the purview of the commission to add some clarifications as to how we want the entrance. And in this case, it would be the Facebook entrance as well as the Menlo Portal entrance, maybe to be re-examined for better pedestrian and bicycle circulations. I think anything beyond that, certainly, again, definitely will welcome that conversation in the future, but this is probably not the project or the place for that as of yet for now. So sorry to kind of, hopefully that kind of clarifies it. I do want to just make sure that we at least within the scope of this project that we contain that, but then recognizing some of the higher level dialogues that we can have in the future.
All right, so can staff restate the motion so that we know either what we are voting on or make any final comments or amendments?
Sure. I don't know if Christian, if you have better notes or if anyone else has better notes than I do, but I'll take a stab at it first. So certainly I think I heard approval of the left turn restriction itself, but then with some some amendments to really examine the roadway configuration. And of course, I would specifically focus on the project at hand here, which would be the Facebook buildings, as well as the Menlo Portal driveway entrances. And of course, that includes those clear signs that we have talked about, also mid-block crossing that pertains to, again, just the Menlo Portal building itself. So if it's okay, I think that's what I've heard so far. I understand that I'm kind of confining the motion a little bit as well, but I want to make sure that that's at least that's what I've captured thus far. And of course, we have heard definitely several conversations about those bigger picture items, which we can follow up in the future as well.
Mm-hmm. And any comments on that before we vote? All right, not seeing any. And Commissioner Baruzzi, does that sufficiently address your concerns without additional comments before we vote?
I have lots of concerns, but I think the scope tonight, we have to vote on what the scope is. I just wish in general that our city would look at things more holistically.
Okay. Thanks, and can staff help us vote?
Okay, great, thank you. And just again, acknowledging what Commissioner Baruzzi just mentioned, and that's certainly something that we can definitely have much more conversations about, even for the next agenda item to be So we have a motion and a second on the table, a motion by Commissioner Sabrian and a second by Commissioner King. So for those commissioners that would like to vote yes for this project, for this particular item, if you can please raise your hand and hold it for a couple of seconds. Okay. I am seeing one. So I'm seeing hands by Chair Levin, Commissioner Altman, Commissioner King, Commissioner Sabrian, Commissioner Lee, Commissioner Peruzzi and Commissioner Comey. I do not see a hand by Commissioner Jensen and Co. So may I assume that that would be a vote, no vote from the two of you?
Yeah, I'm gonna recuse myself from this one because of my employment with Facebook.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you.
I'd like to abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Great. So with that, I believe the motion then passes. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you, Christine, and the Vanessa and Steve for your presentation. So feel free to have the rest of the night. All right, Chair, at this time, I'll return the meeting back to you.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to everybody for wrestling with that one. And maybe as in our next agenda item, if you want to think about ways of being more proactive, we can do that under. So in this next item is to evaluate commission subcommittees to support city council priorities. And I'm going to give take a second of discretion to give some color on this item before turning it over to staff. And this is something that came from the discussion with the chair and the vice chair and staff, as well as coming from subcommittees that really and having a lot of new commissioners that wanted to have some clarity on what our different subcommittees were doing. And we thought that it would be really helpful for people, new and experienced, to be able to look at what these different subcommittees were doing and set forward a goal in a way that would help to focus and motivate people to achieve those goals that are supporting the goals of the city council. And so it is getting a little bit late. This is not something that we are required to do by any particular deadline. So I would love to hear a staff introduction and for us to go through a number of different subcommittees. And, we may not get done this entire topic this evening. And if not, I would like us to be able to maybe take some actions or make some recommendations in this meeting and roll further discussion into other meetings rather than go till midnight. So last color comment is that there may be some suggestions about doing things even more differently, which would be a worthwhile and a conversation to have. But I don't want any big ideas to also keep existing people and to delay and defer existing people and existing projects. So I want us to make some progress and then maybe make even more progress in subsequent meetings. And with that, we'll turn that over to Kevin Chen to introduce the item.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that introduction right there. I think certainly to speak to your point, tonight's item, we really try to focus on a couple of things, but certainly obviously open to entertain any other big picture conversations as well. But first and foremost, with the our work plan recently being approved by the city Complete Street Commission, which subsequently will be going to the City Council for final adoption, there are certain tasks that have been delegated to us. And as a result of that, I want to take this opportunity to to sort of formalize the assignment process and see if any of the subcommittees would be interested in taking those on. And of course, I'm talking about specifically on the work plan. And sorry, as I speak, I I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you have the work plan in front of you. So as we all remember, when we had our work plan discussion, the two specific items that were directed by the City Council to the Commission, one was the evaluation of the current process and procedure of the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program. So of course, with tonight, I think at least from staff's perspective, we would be appreciative if we can identify a subcommittee that would like to take this on. And of course, given the different charges that we have, that's sort of, I'm jumping all over the places, but kind of leads to the second item, which is we want to make sure that we as a commission recognize the need for the subcommittees to be completely independent from one another. And some of the subcommittees, I think as time goes by, will form with a specific purpose, but of course with developments of projects and programs, that line might not be as clear anymore. So that was kind of the second task that I wanted to tackle tonight. But again, going back to the first one, we definitely have the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. That will be one of them. And then the second one is for item number 5, which is evaluate the current state of the Safe Route to School program. So again, just looking to see if there's a subcommittee that would like to take this on as a task and proceed for this upcoming year. And of course, we have number 6, which again has not been adopted by the City Council, but I believe this would be kind of the multimodal subcommittee naturally, since that's the subcommittee that brought this to our attention. So with that in mind, I do want to at least hopefully make myself clear of those 2 particular tasks. Just wanted to see if any of the subcommittees would be willing to take those on, and then also maybe spend a little bit of time talking about some of the, well, not some, but the subcommittee charges to make sure that we are still clear with what they are.
Okay, so as a process here, do we want to start with the we can do this in 2 different directions. We can look at the subcommittees and say, you know, what is the subcommittee doing as relates to the goals, and or do we want to go through the goals and then figure out who's doing the goals?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. So if it's okay with the commission, I think I would prefer that we go down maybe the subcommittees and just have 1 or 2 sentences from the subcommittee members about what they expect the subcommittee to be doing for the upcoming year, and use that as the springboard to decide which of the work plan items should go to which subcommittee.
All right, bearing in mind that reorganization is a possibility. So
absolutely, and that's why we wanted to bring this item forward. So with that in mind, I think the first one would be the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. Now, to my knowledge, this subcommittee was first created as a way for us, the commission, to be able to talk to the EQC, which is our Environmental Quality Commission. At that time, the city was taking on the Climate Action Plan update. So this particular subcommittee was created with the goal of being able to communicate with the commission and bring back any information, updates, etc., to the commission, and without violating any Brown Act violations, obviously. So with that in mind, I wonder if Commissioner Jensen and Chair Levin, not sure if you guys have met yet about this, but do you guys have a desire to continue that role on the subcommittee, or if you guys have any other thoughts, would be welcome.
Yeah, so can you also put, and maybe you can split screen it, maybe that will help us to have the list of subcommittees to look at also.
Absolutely.
Yes, so we did meet and had a suggestion. So it continues to be the case that City Council has climate action as a high priority. So having the Complete Streets Commission support council in climate action and the various elements of climate action that relate to transportation, that's something that is extremely important. However, what we found from looking at the subcommittee structure and the climate action plan was that the work that we are doing on the commission for climate action is actually split amongst different subcommittees. So there is the zero emission subcommittee that has over time worked on a number of different initiatives relating to zero emission vehicles. There's some important elements of the climate action plan relating to zero emission vehicles. And meanwhile, there are also separately elements of the TMP implementation that are about prioritizing projects that reduce vehicle miles traveled and then reviewing proposals for them in a way that makes sure that they help reduce vehicle miles traveled. And that's covered under Transportation Master Plan. And then as well, there are transportation demand management and transit items that have been covered under the multimodal subcommittee. So the recommendation that we came up with, which we would welcome feedback from staff, was because we're doing the work, but in other subcommittees, that we Commissioner Jensen was really most interested in zero emission vehicles and as that relates to climate action. So and we would zero out G1 and get rid of that as a standalone subcommittee and continue to work on our climate action items and clearly communicate to the EQC where those different projects were so that we could synchronize on climate progress without violating the Brown Act. That would put a little bit more burden on them to communicate to us and knowing who to talk to about what. But that keeps us from having one climate action item that then sucks in a lot of other diverse activities that don't have, like if people are interested in bike ped projects, but not zero emissions vehicles and vice versa, it doesn't require all of that to be in one subcommittee. Does that make sense to first of all, Commissioner Jensen, does that correctly reflect what a conversation was? And then staff, does that make sense? And does that seem like a viable option?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think the big question mark in the air is how communication with the EQC goes forward, because the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee was so dedicated or created just for that purpose or primarily for that purpose. As long as we have a plan for that, I feel like this makes the most sense because it seems like we have so many areas of interest in the Climate Action Plan kind of area of projects. So, yeah.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Jensen's point, I think that's probably the one thing that we'll need to sort it out. And as at this moment in time, looking at that list, I would again don't want to speak to any of the subcommittees, but I think for the Transportation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee, perhaps we can have that responsibility of in the future any needs to communicate with the EQC or anything that is CAP Climate Action Plan related to have that responsibility dedicated to the TMP Implementation Subcommittee. Given that seems to be at least looking at just the titles of the subcommittee, that seems to make sense to me. Also, given the fact that that's already within the charge of the TMP Implementation Subcommittee anyways, is to look at projects that really has the most benefit from a climate action standpoint. So again, I don't want to speak for any of the subcommittees, but if that's okay with the TMP implementation subcommittee, I think I would go that route. And then again, not dedicate, but proceed with the reallocation of members as the chair and Commissioner Jensen mentioned.
All right, let me just ask a clarifying question about that. So would it be acceptable if things work that way? So let's say somebody from the EQC is, I think there's the arrows go in two different ways. So if somebody in the EQC is working on EV charging for apartments, say, which is something that they are interested in somewhere in the climate action plan, would they then be able to look up who's on the TMP and then ask, or wouldn't they just go directly to the zero emissions vehicle?
Yes, so I think in order to answer that question, and maybe we can certainly shift the order around, perhaps we can sort of zone in on the charge of the zero emissions subcommittee. While it is a fairly broad term, and zero emission could really mean a lot of things in this day and age. So if it's okay with maybe Commissioner Cromie and to some extent Commissioner Jensen, do you guys have would you guys prefer to have that conversation now, or maybe have let the two of you have an offline conversation first and then maybe come back to the next meeting to really have that discussion?
It doesn't
I
matter
think-
either way.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So given that we do have some flexibility here, so in that case, I would say maybe if the zero emission subcommittee, Commissioner Cromie and Jensen, if you guys can talk about this offline, and then at the next meeting, we'll bring this back, and then we can then decide how the communication between our commission and the EQC will be handled going forward.
Yeah, I would say, Commissioner Jensen, if you have, if you have a vision for that, I'm going to largely default to you. I am just barely hanging on in terms of everything that life's throwing at me right now. So I don't have a lot of spare cycles for emitting much of anything. So if you have a vision, man, I'm happy to get in the passenger seat and hand you the wheel.
Yeah, sounds good. We can jam on it and then come back next month.
Great, thank you very much. So with that being said, I think we have a fairly clear direction for the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. So maybe moving on to Downtown Access and Parking Subcommittee, just to provide a couple of feedbacks. This was formed, again, many of these are formed pre-COVID time, and was really focused on a lot of the improvements that we had lined up coming our way for the downtown area. Of course, with the recent pandemic development, this subcommittee has become a bit more reactive rather than being proactive. So again, I don't see any conflict at this moment in time with any of the subcommittees. So I am comfortable with the subcommittee being as is, but of course, I'll open the table to Commissioners Altman, Baruzzi, and Cole to see if you have any additional feedback.
The one thing, so we haven't had a chance, well, okay, there've been a few different conversations. I think Commissioners Cole and Altman might have had a conversation more recently, but we also had some emails. The one area of potential overlap that I wanted to note, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, we had discussed some interest in exploring some kind of e-bike pilot for downtown employee access and seeing whether there were opportunities. I think there was something that State Senator Josh Becker was working on. And anyway, very, very preliminary discussions, but that also sounds like potential overlap with zero emissions. And Commissioners Cole and Altman, if your thinking has advanced since that email exchange, let me know. That was the one thing that jumped out at me.
No, I have a hand raised, so I hope it's okay to talk. Thank you, Commissioner Abruzzi. No, our conversation is not advanced, but I do agree that if we are trying to create a really robust climate action committee, then it feels like pulling issues around zero emission, zero emission committee, pulling issues around zero emission into that committee and out of the other subcommittees is a good idea. So for example, like some of the things we talked about over email around, an e-bike, subsidy or something like that. I wonder what you think, Commissioner Abruzzi, about pulling that into the Zero Commission subcommittee and out of ours. Is that kind of what we want to be doing, is to pull those issues and aggregate them?
That certainly seems like a reasonable thing to do. Yeah.
I think it is, because I tend to think that those types of issues benefit from being centralized.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious about the Commissioners Jensen and Cromie, if this is the kind of thing that you would imagine that your subcommittee would work on.
Given the total lack of anything that we've accomplished on the zero emission subcommittee, I'm pretty agnostic as to what we might focus on in the future.
Same, I'm open to it.
Commissioner, and I think this raises two different questions. So one is, out of the commissioners that are currently and prospectively interested in zero emissions, is the idea of an e-bike pilot of interest to explore, and then would there be somebody from, or people who were interested in e-bikes as relates to downtown, be interested in participating in a zero emission project about e-bikes downtown and any place else that it might apply?
Well, e-bikes are like my love language. Love. So it's hard for me to resist. As loath as I am to be like another, anyway, but yeah, I do like the e-bike, so I'd be happy to be part of that conversation.
I guess I don't want to muddy the waters here, but this actually raises another issue for me, which is I sort of wonder if we shouldn't be moving more toward, I think Commissioner Levin and I might have a robust disagreement on this, I'm not sure, but ad hoc, like a more ad hoc project-oriented subcommittee structure that could be a little more fluid, as in like this year, there are these like 5 cool ideas that we're working on and 3 things City Council asked us to work on. How do we divide and conquer those? Who wants to do each one? It feels a little more fluid and focused and purposeful. And that way, even though Commissioner Cromie has expressed interests in zero emissions over the years, if he doesn't have the capacity to be on a subcommittee project in the next 9 months because he's, doing important life things, then it wouldn't be like nobody gets to do e-bikes because that one subcommittee doesn't have enough capacity. It would be like somebody who does have capacity and interest can work on on a very focused like e-bikes subsidy for downtown workers type proposal and see if there's any there. Let me just throw that out and see what other people think.
Fight.
I totally support that, Katie, because I like even listening to Adina just be like e-bike. We still had a moment where I was like, that's another subcommittee. So I think it would be a nice way to like get people to dive into short-term projects where you feel accomplished at the end of it. And then you can reconfigure around different projects. And so you aren't necessarily, anyway, I would support that.
So if it makes sense to have a project, the other thing that we're looking to do is to reduce overlap and Brown Act confusion. So would we want to have two different projects, one that was working on electric cars and a second that was working on electric bikes? Or would we want to have one project that had people working on electric cars and electric bikes?
I think personally, it makes sense to separate them into separate projects. If that's, I mean, it sounds like Commissioner Cibrian's specifically interested in e-bikes, and I would be interested in both, but I think that it probably makes sense to break it down at the granularity that makes sense for other people. My thought in response to Commissioner Biruzzi's suggestion is, I think it's a great idea to do it on a project basis, as long as we don't end up just churning on the split of the committees every month, right? It's like, I feel like we need to have a cadence that's long enough that we give people time to kind of sit and ruminate on the project or whatever, and figure out what kind of proposals need to happen. And then spending the majority of our time on, making those decisions rather than these, just the kind of churning on the organizational aspect of the commission. But yeah, that's my initial thought in response to that.
All right, and I'm gonna take privilege and respond to that, which is that I think that having project-based groupings, I think, is really good. But if we only have project-based groupings, then that basically makes it much harder for for subsets of commissioners to take initiative in an area that we are supporting council on. Because if we don't have a project on it and we don't even have a grouping to work on the project on it, then we need to bring it to the commission, decide to work on it, decide who works on it, approve it, and then do it. And then it's 3 months later. So my preference would be for a mix for things that are known to be time limited that people can work on, but without only having things be ad hoc, because then that would reduce our opportunity to be proactive. And I see that Commissioner Sebring has a hand.
Oh, I like that idea, because as I also think about like the Safe Routes subcommittee, like I don't see it, I would love for that to be a short-term project. And we like whip together our Safe Routes plan and the city's like, sweet, let's put it in place. And then we move on. But I just see like that, there are some committees that have kind of long-term work, to Commissioner Jensen's point. And I think it would be nice to be able to work on those long-term projects. But I also agree with having the ability to kind of pop into short-term projects, and then bring them back, because I feel like it just can make some things happen faster. So I like both.
Okay, well, can we try this out with Safe Routes to School subcommittee, and then come back to the EV questions. So on Safe Routes to School, there's obviously, there's a charge for that City Council wants the Safe Routes to School program explored. So question 1 is, does the Safe Routes to School program subcommittee, as it is, want to take this on? Commissioner Lee.
So we've already met to talk about that. So we've already taken it on, I guess, is the short answer.
Okay, so you have taken this on as a short-term project. That is excellent. And so I think that to staff's goal of having us map our groupings and the goals from council. So that's good. And so then the other question is, since there's an interest in having short-term projects, does the Safe Routes to School subcommittee want to disband as a subcommittee after this project is done?
I don't know. I think we'll have to see what else, if it's something where we're monitoring the program and trying to assist the city staff that is working on Safe Routes, it may be that we continue to have that formal role.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like this group is ready to, it's ready to take on a short-term project, but not ready to say we're going to do a short-term project and then go away proof, the defining the short-term project will come with a recommendation about what it may want to do going forward.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
I agree.
Anybody else want to chime in there?
I agree. I second that.
Commissioner Altman.
I'm just confused about the subcommittees and all that. Can you run me through an example of how a project comes to the safe routes? How does that work? Or do you generate the project yourself? Or what's the difference between normal work and a project for the subcommittee? Just using safe routes as an example.
Okay, well, yeah, sure. I'll jump in. So in this case, the city commissioner, council members specifically asked the Safe Routes to School subcommittee, or the Complete Streets committee, to evaluate the Safe Routes to School program that the city has. So that is a charge that's coming to us from City Council. So that's not something we created, although it's something that I think the members of the subcommittee have been thinking about already. So that, in terms of a project that we would generate ourselves, we might, for example, I'm just thinking out loud here, we might take it upon ourselves to say, hey, we have noticed and heard from the community that children are biking the wrong way down Santa Cruz Avenue. What can we do to let staff know what's going on there, and what do we see that might be helped? And that is, maybe doesn't fall to the level of like grand commission stuff, but is an observation that we are getting from our own observations and from community members.
Okay, so just to get that back to you, so then there is a charge from the city council to evaluate where we're at with the safe routes, correct?
Right, correct.
Right, so does that have a time box on it? Does it have a delivery, date on it? Or is it ongoing to continue to evaluate it?
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'm not picking on it, just,
This was unusual because the city did not put a particular timestamp on it, but basically the staff member who is the official Safe Routes to School, staffer, is on a contract. And so that contract gets renewed regularly. And we would hope to get some sort of a recommendation to City Council before the next cycle of renewal.
Okay, so as it stands now, is there a task to evaluate safe routes? Is there what?
Yes, we would look at what we would, so, not to go into too much detail here, but basically we would look at the original scope of what the Safe Routes to School coordinator was tasked with, see if we still think that those goals are appropriate and how they've measured against those particular things. So we're just looking at in detail, what was this person charged with doing? Do we think that they still should be charged with the same thing? Just looking at how has that role benefited the city, right?
Okay, so in the terminology, that's a project that has a finite scope for which there is a deliverable.
Right, there's a specific task at hand.
Okay, and so if something else came along, right, you would reprioritize or wait until you got that evaluation done. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the nature of the subcommittees is that they tend to be a little bit more informal. So yes, if something else huge came up that we heard, we would say, hey, this is something that we need to consider as well. We need to bring it to the attention of, maybe it's just, if it was really huge, I think we would want to bring it up to the consideration of the whole commission.
Okay, so it's okay.
And if I might jump in here, I think the Safe Route to School, Route to School Program Subcommittee is a really good example in this case. To Commissioner Altman's point, we as Commission, our first duty is to advise the City Council. So as a result of that, everything that we do is either directed by the City Council directly, or relates to the city council's work plan, which gets reviewed and approved on an annual basis. So a lot of times, the current subcommittees that you're looking at right now, the list of subcommittees that you're looking at right now, they all originated from a city council project. So the Safe Route to School was one of them. It was formed after the city have allocated budget and subsequently hire a Safe Route to School coordinator. Prior to that happening, there was no Safe Route to School subcommittee, I don't believe. So that's essentially one of the main charge of any of the subcommittees is to look for ways to help out with the city council's annual work plan. And of course, the fact that it's a subcommittee also means within that process, sometimes something new might come up, and that allows the subcommittee to bring it back to the commission, and hopefully subsequently would go to the city council if it's an item of interest for the entire commission. So for example, sorry to pick on the Safe Route to School program subcommittee, but for example, I know one of the commissioners attend the Safe Route to School task force meeting, which is hosted by city staff, all the school representatives, of course, as well as one of our representatives from the subcommittee. And of course, they would talk about various topics during that meeting. If something of interest out of that meeting that the subcommittee feel like, okay, we see this as an element of concern, and we want city staff to address it, they would bring it back to us, and then we as a city staff would then look at all the things that we have going on right now, and just first and foremost, just see where it fits in. Perhaps it's a project that we already thought about for next year. Then we can say, okay, well, we already have this plan for next year. If it's a brand new project that is, just absolutely brand new, which at this moment in time is possible, then we need to develop a way to see how we can fit that in within, again, all the stuff that are going on. So to I think Commissioner Chair Levin's point, we definitely want to focus our effort to advise the city council, but at the same time, if something out of those events or meetings that comes up that the commission might be interested in taking on, then that's a whole nother set of procedures that we can deal with at that moment in time. But that just hopefully provides you a kind of a high level picture of what the subcommittees are usually tasked with.
Thanks. I want to go back and ask a question about, actually, I want to restate something about climate action, because I think I said it, but maybe I'm not sure anybody other than me understood it. So I'm going to say it again. And then I'm going to ask a question of downtown access and parking. And then I'm going to wonder if we are at a stopping point for now that we can revisit in a subsequent meeting. So in the climate action, the analysis of the topic of climate action was that we have several different types of transportation activity relating to climate action. One is electric vehicles. Another one is bicycle and pedestrian projects that reduce vehicle miles traveled. And the third is public transportation and transportation demand management. And if we try to squish them into one subcommittee, because there are different clusters of people on our commission who are interested in those different topics, it would be hard to get that all into one subcommittee. And we're taking advantage of people's different interests in having people work on electric vehicles over here, while there's other people who are looking at VMT reduction via bike ped over there. So that was the reason for the recommendation to continue to work robustly on climate action in several different subcommittees or groupings. I wanted to go back to Commissioner Cole. Did you have a comment on that? Did that make sense.
I did have a comment on that, and I know we'll get there over time with the conversations going on among commission members, but just in my experience, I feel that efforts are more productive and efficient if they're focused on a specific goal, even if it encompasses different areas. So I, on principle, would like to posit that I think bringing people together, whether they're working on bikes and someone else is working on, someone's working on e-bikes and someone's working on other ways to reduce climate change, but they're all under the same umbrella. I personally think that is more effective. That's it.
I hear you, and we can talk about this more later. I also don't think that there is that much overlap between coming up with a strategy for EV chargers and making sure that our streets are safe for biking and walking. So I think you would be right. If there was more overlap, then I think that there might be.
Maybe. I'm not talking about safety, though. I'm talking about the specific, the uniting any initiatives that all have the specific focus of reducing, of tackling climate change and emissions. Okay, moving on.
All right. So I want to go back to the downtown access and parking, and to ask, has that group met, and does it have a particular focus in terms of meeting a city council goal, or does it want to, like, is there something yet under G2, or should there be a different configuration relating to G2 or not?
I think we need more time, and we haven't met yet.
Fantastic, great. Okay, so then the remaining items that we haven't spoken about are the transportation master plan implementation, the multimodal metric subcommittee, which is a particular project that is also an intersection with the transportation master plan subcommittee. And then the somewhat confusingly named multimodal subcommittee, which really works on transit and transportation demand management. And given the hour, I would propose that we return to that cluster of topics at our next meeting. Does anybody have any thoughts about splitting the conversation accordingly?
I'd second that.
Yeah, I would second that. I third that.
Put a fork in it.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Great. So I think that, so do we have our, the folks that are interested in various different aspects of electric vehicles, who are clearly a sub-Brown Act set of people? So we have Commissioner Jensen, Commissioner Cromie, and optionally Commissioner Sebrian can talk amongst themselves about what next steps about electric vehicles. All right, so Kevin, have we made sufficient progress in talking about approximately a half of the city council goals and as they relate to the commission?
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, thank you for this robust discussion. I know the topic is, it could be very broad, as Vice Chair Cole mentioned, or it could be very specific. And that's sort of the beauty and sometimes the frustration of the subcommittees as it relates to what their responsibilities are. And so I absolutely appreciate the conversation and something that we will continue to have. I think for tonight's agenda, I think we're definitely heading to the right direction. The only one thing I would add to that is if we can maybe just have an acclamation, and we don't need to necessarily vote, just to formalize the addition of Commissioner Jensen to the Zero Emissions Subcommittee, just so that they can talk offline in preparation for next month's meeting. I don't know if Commissioner Cyprian, if you're on the fringe of joining, or if you are at a point where you felt comfortable joining now, but I just wanted to kind of have that option for you in case you want to be part of that conversation, because we do need to formalize it before you join in and then have an offline conversation.
Right. What's my choice again?
Well, so you can either elect to join the Zero Emissions Subcommittee right now. So that
Okay.
what that affords you is to have that offline conversation with Commissioner Jensen and Cromie as to really the charge of the Zero Emissions Subcommittee, and perhaps even maybe talking about the e-bike versus e-charging stations, if that's of your interest. But in order for that to happen, we will need to add you to the subcommittee. If not, then we'll just basically just have Commissioner Jensen, and then, obviously then you Commissioner Cyprian would not be able to have that offline conversation. So that's really your options.
Got it.
Am I clear on that?
I have a question before taking comments from Commissioner Baruzzi and Commissioner Cole, if she has a hand, because there isn't any, the number of people is 3. So that wouldn't have any Brown Act implications. So it seems like if Commissioner Sabrina is exploring being interested in getting more involved in work relating to e-bikes, then she could talk to Commissioners Jensen and Cromie anyway without making a commitment yet. Right.
I would then certainly keep that conversation very high level and nothing specific. I think you're right. It doesn't have to be. It does afford the ability to go more in depth if they so desire. But you're right. If Commissioner Cyprian is simply interested in high level conversations, that means she doesn't really need to join the subcommittee at this point in time.
Some of those details aren't really my thing anyway. So I guess what I would at this point is maybe I will sort of leave myself in exploring and kind of, I am definitely interested in talking about a sort of e-bike pilot plan. And so I would certainly be interested, like if I could have that conversation, and then as we got to a place where you could actually use another person to help do that piece of planning, like I can join the committee then, right? I don't have to join it right today. Absolutely. And so if we're not working on it right today, like I'm happy to put that responsibility a little bit down the road and at least just find out like where we are with it and what I could do to be supportive and when would be a good time for me to join. That's a high enough level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that clarification. So I don't know if Commissioner Baruzzi, your comments regarding to that as well.
All right, Commissioner Baruzzi, whatever it is that you have to say on this general topic is welcome.
Okay, great. One thing is I think we probably forgot to add, maybe you didn't and just nobody said anything, but public comment on this item, probably we need to do before there's any kind of vote. That was one thing. The second thing was that alarm bells went off for me when Kevin just made that comment about Commissioner Cyprian not wanting to say anything other than very high level in conversations, because I think, like especially for new commissioners, Kevin, it might be useful, probably not now because of the hour, to provide clarity about what we can and can't talk about offline with each other, because frequently there might be an agenda item that you would have an informal conversation about with somebody that you're not necessarily in a subcommittee with, but you're doing sort of a Brown Act buddy type thing. And those tend to be somewhat fluid. That's the way City Council does it too. They're not always Brown acting with the same person. They Brown act fluidly as, on an ad hoc nature. And that's certainly how I've always done this, but, taking care to count noses and making sure, that I'm not, accidentally having a private meeting instead of a public meeting. But maybe we can talk a little bit more about that in a future meeting so that folks understand that, if something's coming up on an agenda and it's not like directly assigned to their subcommittee, still maybe they can talk to people about it and how many and what does that mean, would be really helpful.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a great suggestion.
And the final thing I'm just going to put a pin in for the next conversation is in that goals, there was a sub goal that jumped out at me all of a sudden because it would have been entirely relevant tonight, which was there was a, I can't see the goals right now, but there was one about providing council with guidance around bike and ped circulation around major projects. And we highlighted the Menlo Community Center, but I mean, we're talking about much larger projects tonight. And I would love staff's guidance on how we could be a little more proactive so that it's not like a turn comes to us and we're like, well, wait, what about bike and ped circulation? You know, what's a better way, since that is an actual commission goal that was given us by council or that was approved by council, what's an actual way that we can facilitate our exploration as a commission? And should that be a subcommittee job? Or if staff can think about that and bring that back next time, that would be great, I think.
Yeah, no, that's another great suggestion right there. And I think I definitely I think we all kind of alluded to that already tonight based on the previous conversation. So
yeah, just figuring out how to formalize that part of it and get it into the process.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I definitely would, yes, I think there's another conversation that we should be having.
Mm-hmm. And something that's related to what Commissioner Abruzzi just said as a question I have for staff is one is about how we can be helpfully proactive with regard to individual developments, but also the city is working on the housing element, which is a major planning update for the city required by state law. And there often, when cities do housing elements, there are related policies, and some of the policies may relate to transportation. So the question I have is whether, and if so, how, with our working structure, would it make sense for us to give advice to the city council relating to transportation policies or relating to the housing element? So if staff could think about giving some feedback on that too, that would be welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's another discussion. I don't know if we necessarily want to get into at this moment in time, but I think, I guess I'll briefly highlight a couple of things that I'll be seeking from the commission as a whole. Obviously, there's a desire from Chair Levin to perhaps explore this further. So maybe for any of the commissioners that might be interested in the topic, maybe you can spend the next month thinking about that, and we can come back at the next meeting to see if there's more than one interest to move this item forward. I would say that typically, you know, if there's more than 2 people that are interested in this topic, and again, the topic being looking at transportation, looking at the housing element, but of course with a focus on transportation related topics, so any policies, etc. If there's more than 2 interests, then we can consider forming a subcommittee. And then to someone's point, this would be a very specific task, not a high level conversation. So I guess we can leave it at that, just opening up that dialogue. And if there's any commissioners that might be interested in this topic, between now to the next meeting would be a good time for you to kind of explore that and see if that's something that we as a whole commission wants to take further. So hopefully that makes sense.
All right, I see that Commissioner Cole has a hand.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to close at least my participation in this meeting with explaining to the group why I abstained on the vote around the left turn on Constitution. It wasn't so much that in and of itself was potentially a good idea. It was just that I was troubled by the fact that when this group asked perfectly reasonable questions of staff and the Facebook folks around, as Katie said, thinking more holistically about that area and how it was going to develop over the future and looking forward to potentially planning for ped and bike traffic, I felt like there was a complete lack of response from the other side. And I think it's okay for us as a commission if those are the things that we care about on behalf of Menlo Park and on behalf of the work plan of the council, to expect that our partners who present decisions to us come to the table prepared to talk about those things. I think that's a reasonable expectation.
And I think, thank you, Vice Chair Cole. And I think that would be another thing for staff to come back in this conversation, because when commissioners have an observation about a particular project, but that relates to some broader plan or broader policy, if staff can think about how they can give us guidance about how to do that, because it does seem to be overall within our purview about doing that. And so I don't think it should be about whether, but I think staff can think about how to tell us how to do that.
And those are point well taken by us, and those are with certainly the new conversations that are surfacing. I think those are definitely worth further exploration, and I certainly am noting all of this, but by no means am I ignoring any of the conversations that we're having tonight. So, and please don't take the fact that I'm saying we can talk about that in the future as a way of just basically pushing the kicking the can down the road, so to speak. But it's definitely, I think those are definitely conversations that on staff level we're definitely welcome to have with the commission as well.
Okay, and thank you, Vice Chair Cole, for raising that, and Kevin for considering doing, like bringing that back to us. Do we have any comments from members of the public about the organization of the various different subcommittees and their charges to support council priorities? I am not seeing any hands from members of the public. And isn't everybody glad that we didn't go through all of the subcommittees and all of the goals tonight? So I would like to return us to the agenda, where we are now up to informational items, which are which is F, transmitted to the commission in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. These are not action items. However, commission, city staff member, or member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. Will Kevin provide an update on any informational items?
I am so sorry to do this to you all, and I'm jumping in. I'm pretty sure Kevin asked us to vote. I just remember we had JK wanted to join the zero emission subcommittee. Did we actually need to, by acclamation, just close that loop so it doesn't have to get re-agendized?
Thank you very much. So by acclamation, if there's any objection, obviously you can raise your hand at this moment in time. Otherwise, I will declare this a yes vote by acclamation. So just give commissioners a couple seconds. Sounds like we have nodding heads. So excellent. Thank you very much for that reminder.
All right. Yay. Thank you, Commissioner Baruzzi. And now moving on to informational items.
Great, thank you very much. So staff, I don't have any information, major project updates for you at this time, although I do have some good news. One good news that I want to share with the commission, and that is the transportation team. We have officially completed our vacancy and exploration of candidates. So we have two new members. One is Fong Vu. He's our newest associate transportation engineer. So hopefully within the next few months or so, we'll be able to bring him on board and then meet the commission. The second member, which is now appearing in front of you on a separate screen, is our Hugh Lau Sai. Some of you might remember him from the Oak Grove bike lane project when he was working as a member of the Alta company, but he is now our assistant public works director for the transportation division. So as many of you know, that vacancy, that position was vacated with Nikki being promoted to our public works director, and for the past few months or so, Christiane has did a very good job of filling that vacancy. But now we have Hugh on board, so I know he wants to say a few words. So Hugh, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin, and nice to see many of you again and meet the rest of you, and very much look forward to working with you all over the coming years and months and years as we do this. So thank you very much.
All right, welcome, Hugh.
Great, thank you, Hugh. So with that, I will conclude my project status update. Thank you.
All right, I have a question, and others may have other questions. There was in correspondence, I had asked about Middlefield, which was a project that was in the capital improvement plan and for the coming year, and there is some kind of change in the schedule. Can staff explain the change in the schedule for Middlefield?
Yeah, absolutely. So as some of you might know, the Middlefield, the CIP project, so this is specifically related to the repaving of Middlefield, was initially scheduled for construction next fiscal year. So by fiscal year, we typically associate June to June rather than calendar year, for those that might not be familiar with the term. So that was initially the plan. As some of the commissioners might know, as we continue to move forward, one of the things that we had collectively thought would be a good idea was that as more CIP projects come through the fold, that we look at the transportation projects as well and see if there's a synergy to combine them with the repaving of the roadways, perhaps to see if there's any transportation projects that we can implement along the way. So within the past year or so, I think we've done a good job of doing that with Ravenswood being one of the projects that we have come forth to the commission as a result of a CIP project, repaving project. So not just a brief background history on that synergy, on the effort right there. With Middlefield specifically, as I mentioned, the initial goal was to have the repaving project by next fiscal year. However, with our recent departure of our Assistant Public Works Director in the engineering side, which was going to be overseeing that project, unfortunately, we do have to put that project on hold temporarily until that position is filled. So what that means is that until that position is filled, that project is currently on hold for the time being. And we're currently anticipating to be able to start the recruiting process, hopefully by later this year or maybe early next year, and with someone to fill the vacancy by spring, hopefully. So, but of course, what that means is that from a commission level, we can still kind of explore Middlefield as a whole. And that is something that if the commission as a whole has an interest on, then we can talk to the chair and co-chair at the next meeting to talk about some of the logistics of how we go about that, and then bringing that to the commission as we continue that conversation. So that would be a quick update on that.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think it needs to go back, because this is something that this commission has said that it was interested in. The TMP subcommittee said it was interested in it and made that as a recommendation, and then the entire commission endorsed it and made it as a recommendation to council. So I would like to, unless we hear the inverse, that people are suddenly not interested, I would like to continue to see us pursue attention to that project.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions about the project status update? Let's see, I am not seeing any hands with the project status update. Are there any public comments about project status updates? Not seeing any either. Okay, moving on to subcommittee reports, where I think because we had a lot of discussion about subcommittees in the previous agenda item, I'm gonna, instead of going through these one at a time, if there was a subcommittee update that is that we didn't already discuss, and B, is timely, please raise your hand to share it with the commission. I am not seeing any, so I think that we have shared the things that were new and timely in the update relating to the goals of the subcommittees, and we can move on. And I don't see any members of the public wanting to comment on something that we basically talked about in another agenda item. So I think that will bring us to adjournment to our next meeting does staff have any, I guess we will also learn from staff about whether there's any change to whether we meet in Zoom or in person or in any other manner, but Commissioner Baruzzi.
Actually, I have a quick question. Hugh, I think you might have worked with Palo Alto on their multimodal level of service assessment a few years ago, like looking at CEQA, VMT, LOS, and like trying to account for like bike and ped levels of stress. And I'm wondering if the multimodal, if that's something you might be working on within the Menlo Park as well, and if that the multimodal metrics subcommittee, which has a near-term task to start making recommendations, high-level recommendations to City Council on this topic, could learn from your experience in that dimension. If I might be so bold, sorry.
Absolutely, please be bold. So yes, I have done some of that type of work for Palo Alto and others in the past, and certainly happy to share resources and experiences.
Great.
Yeah.
Right.
Always on any topic where I have something to share, happy to share.
Well, we will then hit you up. Thank you.
All right, terrific. Anything else from any subcommittees that was not raised in the previous discussion item, other than that good one? Nope. Okay, well then we will adjourn and look forward to any instructions about how we will be meeting at our next meeting. Have a good evening, folks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Have a good night.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, staff.
Good night. Thank you, Madam Chair.